Sorry about that. Yeah, so basically the idea for 3 is how do you say this most efficiently? And usually these are 2 sentences, and so you want to combine them. And if they're 2 independent clauses, then you might have to make one of them a dependent clause. So you do that with adding a comma. And so here it says that result being wrong, and then the algal bloom causes this. Oxygen depletion is stated twice, and instead of stating it twice, you can just do independent to dependent, and boom, you're good. So B and A are both wrong, and then in oxygen depletion, that says the same thing twice. And then this one just goes straight to the noun, and then it has the modifying clause, which is dependent connected with the comma. So that's perfect and very concise. So D. Make sense? Nice. What's the next question you missed here? Only 5 more. Question 16. Okay. At this point, the writer's adding this following sentence. Okay, there are 2 things we consider whenever we're adding things. What are those 2 things? Relevance and redundancy. So, is it relevant? And does it say the same thing that's already been said in the passage? All right, so if it's relevant, then good. If it's redundant, then bad. But if it meets both of those requirements, like it passes them, that is to say it's good, it's relevant, and it's also like not redundant, then absolutely include it, right? So here, unfortunately, the tower's hilt has steadily increased for centuries, placing the structure in danger of collapse. So here we have a shift from the introduction of the tower to then later on in the passage, we have attempts to kind of like save the tower. So here we're like setting the scene, aren't we? So is it relevant? Yes. Is it redundant? No, it's not stated elsewhere. So we do want to keep it. So now we know that we're dealing with A and B. Now A provides information, important restatement of the main claim. No, right? Is that a restatement of the main claim? No, there's no idea that's repeated here. And then B says it establishes an important shift from this to that. What? The intro, yes, that's good. Intro over to the eventual collapse and maybe the danger and the restoration attempts. So B is great. Does that make sense? Okay, this is important. If you have a note paper or whatever, or if you're a person who takes notes, I don't take notes personally, but relevancy, redundancy. And believe me, this took me like 2 years to develop and looking at these questions for a long time until I finally realized this is all they're looking for. And once you can figure out if it passes the relevancy test and isn't redundant, then it is yes. And then from that, you just pick which attribute, typically of relevancy or, whatever it says. And B is essentially just recapitulating the idea of relevancy. So hopefully that demystifies this question type. All right, what's the next question? All right, question 23 here. Which choice is the best introduction to the paragraph? The term paramedics refers to the healthcare workers who provide routine and clinical services. The physician's assistant will see you now. So, paramedics refers to the healthcare workers who provide routine and clinical services. Okay, so here we actually need to read on and kind of figure out what happens. So why don't you just give this a second, kind of read on and tell me, what is the paragraph talking about? What's the main point of the paragraph? Yes, it's talking about the supply and the demand due to the kind of like decreasing number of physicians, right? So this predicts a shortage of physicians by 2020. And then by 2025, that could be a huge shortage of physicians. And so we're talking about supply and demand of physicians. So paramedics is somebody, like a definition of paramedics doesn't bode well here. That's not very important and doesn't really hit at the main ideas. B, for many Americans, finding a physician is likely a growing challenge. 100%, right? Getting treatment requires not about treatment. Worldwide cost, it's not about cost. It's about the supply demand of physicians. So B. All right, now let's talk about strategy for 23, because questions like this, we have to understand how we can change our approach so we get them correct in the future. So what I would say is whenever this happens, here's your checklist. 1, you have to read ahead. So you have to pen this down and say, I'm going to read ahead, RA. And then you go back to the other ones, and then you go back to this one, and you're like, okay, what is this talking about? Well, physicians are, the shortage is increasing of physicians. So you get these keywords, physician, and then you're like, okay, maybe they're talking about physician shortage. So that's the way to do it. You have to have the main idea down before you even attempt this. Okay. So what's the next question? All right, 26. Let's just do a little quiz here. What are we looking for here? What are the 2 parameters that we're hyper concerned with for adding things and removing things? Nailed it, relevancy and redundancy. So at this point, we're considering adding this. Several factors argue in favor of such an expanded role. And that goes in right here. So we have to get some context. So let's just kind of and look at this page break. They do that on purpose. They are trying to make it, I'm not even joking, inconvenient for you to go back and see the previous sentence. It's tricky. One promising avenue is the greater reliance on physicians' assistants, PAs. Okay, this is called mid-level encroachment. It's happening in the medical field, and maybe like relying on PAs to independently practice as doctors. All right, and so maybe if these PAs are going to work as doctors, that might solve the problem, wouldn't it? And so some people argue that, hey, this is a good idea. That's like a good transition statement that kind of like leans us into this next idea, which says PAs can perform these things done by doctors, right? And then also it talks about like the benefits of PAs here. So there are several factors that are going to be talked about here. And so this is a yes for me. Is it relevant? Yes. Is it redundant? No. So yes. So cancel off these. Then we read A, because it introduces the counter argument for balance. There's no counter argument here. Where? I don't see it. Where? This is just an introduction statement. So this is ridiculous. It tries to get me to go in places that I just do not agree with. Like Henry David Thoreau says, you got to stand up for yourself. B, yes, because it frames the point that the paragraph will examine. 100%. Hundo. What are they examining? They're examining these factors that could advocate for this expanded role of the PAs to take the job of the primary care physician, MD, and DOs. Yeah, cool beans. Cool beans. This is a cool kind of paragraph because it is happening. There are a lot of problems with the medical system and specialties and stuff. So anyways, what's next? 34. Most effectively combines these sentences. Okay, this is another one of those combining sentence things. All right, so here we just look at each one here. It says gold into silver, the reverse alchemy of superhero comics. All right, so in effort to make these characters and stories fresh and relevant, popular franchises are often rebooted, which are then reworked. Okay, so here what we have to do is we have to draw this comparison between rebooting the films and then reworking the comic books. And so we also want to do it in a way that's not super like wordy. So let's see. This one says, in an effort to make these things relevant, and then it says this popular franchise, which are. So here it just keeps on describing this noun over and over again. But what we're actually looking for is some sort of intro, some sort of like dependent clause, commented into an independent clause, which can like describe this relationship accurately. So we have to set up the comparison between the rebooting of films and then the reworking of comics. And if you look at B, here we have that. We have this independent, we have this dependent clause, introductory clause, just as the popular film franchise is often rebooted, comma, superhero comics are periodically reworked. Here we have that comparison. And so this one has the comparison, whereas the other ones don't actually make that comparison. And then sometimes they're also a little bit too wordy. So that's the reason why B is correct. And if you'll note, this is very similar to the first one we covered. You're often looking for a dependent to independent clause or an independent to a dependent, because that's just a super hyper efficient way of doing it. So just try to think, often a good place to start is like which one's shortest. Here, they're all pretty like the same length. And then you could usually think that the most clear way is through this dependent independent kind of way. However, there's also another way to think about this, and that's what is the main thing they're trying to compare or contrast. And then you have to get those contrasting ideas or comparing ideas correct. And so in this case, it's comparing rebooting the films with the reworking of comic books. And so you have to compare those two things. And B is the only one that does that. All right, cool. What's next? Any others? All right, question 40, last one for the writing. This paragraph, congrats, you didn't miss any grammar questions. So that means you've done a really good job with our grammar rules. So you nailed them. Conclusion of the sentence to logically complete the discussion of Silver Age and provides an effective transition to the next sentence. Okay, this is similar to a Simon Says question. What we need to have. So Simon Says, we're playing a game. Yay, we love Simon Says. We're playing this game, and in this game, they're like, hey, dude, talk about Silver Age, and then talk about the next paragraph. If you do those two things, you win. All right? So A and D. Off the bat, A and D, let's look at these. It says 40 subsequent decades showing the appeal of these characteristics. That's a golden age, man. Golden age. These are somewhat under these characters themselves underwent significant changes in the Silver Age. No, man. We're talking about the not the golden age, but the Silver Age, right? And so those are correct because they don't meet this first part of Simon Says, which is Silver Age stuff. All right. And then B, let's look at this one. The distinctions between later stages in the book histories are less well defined between the golden and the silver. Well, here, that's like, we should save that for later on. That's like more transformation would take place here. That like is kind of disjointed from this next paragraph. That would be well to like be talked about and fleshed out a little bit later, not there. Because then it's like we're saying one thing and we're going back and it just like interrupts the flow of the argument kind of. Okay, and then what happens in this next little paragraph here? More transformations take place in the medium here. What's happening in this paragraph? Take a moment to tell me what's going on here. Here we're talking about the Bronze Age, right? Bronze. And so if the Bronze Age is going to start, well, that's going to be after like the end of the other age, right? So we're talking about a transition into this new age. And so what we could say here is that as this thing grew to a close, this is what's happened. Readers increasingly gravitated toward the Silver Age, then we meet the Silver Age parameter, and then also drawing to a close, which sets us up for the new paragraph where they talk about the Bronze, which is then going to start after this age has closed. Does that make sense? There it is. C for 40. All right, so these ones, Simon Says, is very much like this, and then you have to find what the next paragraph is talking about. So you have to read ahead. One of those read ahead questions, and then you juggle these two concepts, and then pick the one that hits both of them. Make sense? All right. Any other questions here for the math that you want to hit? We don't have too much time, so we'll do some of the most pressing math questions you have. Little bonus content here. Question 5 on the no calc. Okay, which of the following is this graph of this equation on this plane? First of all, let me ask you this. What is the slope? And I'm going to teach you a trick. But first of all, tell me what's the slope? Okay, so the slope here is 2. Why? Because this is in the form y equals mx plus b. Does that ring a bell here? M means what? The slope. M means the slope. And what is M in this kind of, if you can look and kind of pattern match this onto this, what is M? 2.
What?
See how M is 2 here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So y is y, M is 2, x is x, B is -5. Does that make sense? I'll write that down. M is equal to 2, B is equal to -5. That's the first step. So is this a positive slope? Yes. So that's a negative slope, so it's not B. Now let's choose between these ones. It should go rise over run. So up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. Does that look like it's going up 2 over 1? Nope, so it's not A. Now these ones look like they might have the same slope, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. So now we deal with these this y-intercept. -5. Well, that one has -5 and this one has 5. So which one's correct? D. Oh. There you go. So that one should be kind of a no-brainer here. Does this make sense now? Maybe just had a little bit of a brain fart or something. Okay. If not, we can also talk about different forms that you can use to derive like these values. This is an late algebra 1 concept where we have coordinates, and based on these coordinates, you find slope and you put it into this formula, the slope-intercept formula, so that you know where B is, and B is this value where it hits the y-axis. So -5 is where it hits the y-axis, so D. You might also see this in standard form, ax plus by equals c, in which case the slope is equal to -a over b. And of course, you could solve that by remembering this, or you could just solve for y until you put it into this form, and then you solve for b. Solve for m, and you'll get the same thing, -a over b. All right, that's just a little crash course into this. I would highly recommend looking into some Khan Academy slope modules if this is a little bit confusing. All right, let's do like 1 or 2 more. What else do we got? All right, question 11 here. This one here. L'chaim. No, this is Chaim Jamie. Jamie? Is that Jamie? I for some reason I was thinking of like L'chaim in Hebrew, whenever you toast or something. Okay, is prepared for a bicycle race. The goal is a bicycle, an average is 280 miles per hour per week for 4 weeks. He bikes 240 for the first week, this one for the next, this one for the next. Which inequality we use to find the number of miles he could bike the 4th week to meet his goal? All right, so this one, I want to bring your attention to this equation. Average is always equal to the sum over the number of things we have. And so you know that we're going to have 280 on kind of like one end of the spectrum here. Oops, didn't mean to delete that. If you have like a sum over a number. And so let's just kind of like look at this here. Oh wait, did you say 10 or 11? Sorry. You said 11? Oh, my bad. Sorry about that. Yeah. Basically, okay, I'll just do this quick then. So this is just times 4 here. There are 4 numbers here. And so you multiply both sides by 4. And now you're left with average is equal to the sum. And so here we have the sum and then is equal to the 4 times the average. And what's the average? 280. Okay, sorry. Sorry about that one. I don't know why. I just went to 10 instead. So 11 here. So the vertex of a parabola here, which is true about this equation. Okay, so the vertex form is always equal to y is equal to a times x minus h plus k. Okay, so this is important to know. Make sure you write this down because this comes up all the time on the SAT. You have to memorize this formula. And I would also recommend memorizing the ellipse formula and also the circle formula. We can talk about those a little bit later if you need to. All right, so we know that the parabola is going to open, let's see, up or down. What do we know for sure? It's open up or down. Actually, it's going to open down. And the reason why is because parabolas that have a positive A look like this, and parabolas that have negative A look like this. And the way you remember this is down like a frown. So you're negative. Down like a frown. See this dude? He's frowning. And so the graph opens downward. So it's either B or D, right? And then the vertex is HK, isn't it? And so if the vertex is HK, then we have to do some like manipulation with this H. But first of all, let's start with the K. Is the K value just C? Do you see how that's the same? So this y value of the vertex, because what is the vertex? The vertex is HK. That's why I'm harping on it. That's what the vertex is. And so K is C. Do you agree? Okay, it's C. All right, so K is C, and that means, okay, they're both C, so that didn't matter. Now we just have to figure out what our H is. Is it going to be negative or positive? That's the crux of this question, right? And so here, basically, we find that the vertex is going to be positive, because as you can see here, the H is just B, so it's just positive. So the answer is B for 11, because that minus is embedded into the equation. It's not part of this H, and therefore H is equal to B, not equal to negative B. Make sense? All right, sounds good.